those folks. Moving now to to board action item 2.02. This one is receive for action a resolution for suspension of school board policy during the COVID-19 pandemic. And in view of our time, I would like to say that we all have it, we've had it, and we'll dispense with the reading of that resolution. I do believe that Ms. Gibson wanted again to discuss changes to this. Am I correct, Ms. Gibson? Yes, okay. So Ms. Gibson, you wanted to suggest a change to the resolution for suspension of school board policy.
So my hope is that since with the adoption of the resolution, if the previous resolution, if we have the ability to be more nimble in terms of the frequency that the board meets, that in lieu of suspending our policy, that we would be able to meet more frequently to make changes and address the needs at hand. So that would be my first preference. In lieu of that, my request is that we look at language that would speak specifically to timing, that the board would be notified of such changes to any policy, and that both the board and the public is provided updates in terms of any policies that have been suspended, and then also include language that specifies that any suspended policies must be ratified by the board at the next meeting, or that, and if not, then the action would not continue to stand. I think that public input is of important, especially, sorry, I have a son also sharing this table with me, that public input is the sacred cow here. So as we think specifically about the budget process, I think it's critical that we not make changes to any policies that would take less, that would basically impact the public participation in this process. And so, those are my primary concerns. So the budget process, notifying the board and the public, say, a week in advance, and that the board must ratify any changes at its next meeting.
Ms. Lilly?
Yes, I'd like to bring the board's attention. I know we did not read it out loud, but this particular resolution, and I would like to mention that this is a resolution that was a model resolution that was provided by the Virginia School Board Association. And the resolution specifically speaks to, in the final clauses of the provision on page 2, that this resolution would suspend such policies or provisions within policies which reflect legal and or regulatory requirements that have been waived by the governmental authority which enacted those requirements. And so this is not a blanket policy suspension for all of school board policy. This speaks to, and if you read the preamble to the resolution, it speaks to the provisions of the regulations and policies that the Virginia Department of Education had to get waivers from with respect to standards of learning testing and those types of federally and state mandated requirements, if you will, that the state has already been waived from. And so this is what this resolution speaks to. And I'd again like to, again say this was the model language that was provided to us by the state.
Okay, so obviously we haven't got the ability for anybody to write a motion at this point, but I think what Ms. Gibson is proposing is that she would like to amend the resolution. So do we have a second to Ms. Gibson's proposal to amend the resolution?
Second.
I'm sorry? Who was that? Was there a second?
Dr. Sapini.
Okay, Dr. Sapini has seconded it. So now, when we vote on, help me with this, Ms. Lilly and Ms. Wilson, do we vote just on the amendment first?
First, we would need to know specifically the language that Ms. Gibson wants to include or amend the resolution. You just can't say, I want to amend the resolution without specifically giving the language that you would like to amend it to. So, we can.
And what
I heard the themes, but given the context that I provided, I don't know whether that changed the request, or I don't know exactly what to change it to unless that's articulated.
Okay, Ms. Gibson, did her explication satisfy you?
I think that the additional language should be, let's see, so therefore be it further resolved that the superintendent will notify the board and public 1 week prior to the suspension of any policy, and that the board must ratify that policy change at its next public meeting, or the action will not stand.
I would like to add again that the waivers that were already received and obtained by the states for SOL, I don't want to put the board in a situation where if the Virginia Department of Education has already sought waivers, for example, for the standards of learning test, what later is the board going to ratify? Those standards have already been changed. And so the resolution is attempting to codify the changes that were already done by the waivers and all of that from the State Department and from the federal level. So, I just want to make sure the board understands that.
Okay, so perhaps it's therefore be it resolved that the superintendent notify the board of any further policy changes or waivers. Would that satisfy you, Ms. Gibson?
Yes, and I'm speaking specifically to school board policy. So if there are state regulations that the waiver addresses, that's one thing, but I'm speaking specifically to the suspension of board policies.
Of course, our policies, some of them are in line with the state, and so those are the ones that, so we'll just say that this will cover those, but you're saying if there's anything further down the line.
Right.
So can I include that word?
Absolutely.
Be it resolved that the superintendent notify the board of any further policy waivers in advance.
The board and public.
The board and public in advance. And you're saying 7 days in advance?
Yes.
All right, that's one. What was the other?
And that the board must ratify at its next meeting, ratify that change at its next meeting, or the action does not stand.
All right, so that's really one amendment.
Yes.
All right. Okay, I'm going to read it again. And is this the only one, Ms. Gibson? Are you satisfied about the other things you raised?
Yes, Ms. Lilly can speak to the pandemic. I just want to make sure it's very explicit that this is, what the duration of this is. And so is it defined by the state of emergency that is been set by the governor? What is the end date for this resolution?
On page 2, it says the suspension of the policies of the school board is in effect for the duration of the time that the waiver of laws and or regulations reflected in the policies are waived. So again, this is tracked back to the waivers, the regulations that have been suspended and or modified during the pandemic. So as long as those have been modified and the requirements are no longer there, then, this resolution would be effective throughout that process. I'd also like to mention something about the ratification. It's very if the superintendent is going to, just in matter of practicality, if an action is going to be taken with the suspension of the policy and the board later does not ratify that and an action has already been taken, that could be tricky. And so I don't know how that would work practically. And also Ms. Page would like to speak.
Yeah, I saw that. Ms. Page would like to speak. So Ms. Page?
That the information that Attorney Lilly has provided us, it speaks to any of the concerns that board members may have. Because the resolution was guidance from the Virginia School Board Association. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so Attorney Lilly has addressed any concerns that we as board members, may have. So my question is, under your advisement, are there any changes that would need to be made? Attorney Lilly? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Ms. Page.
Okay.
And I'm only
All right, Ms. Lilly.
yes, I'm only suggesting that when we're putting language in a resolution, that the language that's being added makes is feasible. And I just want the board to understand that if they're adding the language, which is your pleasure to do, actions that have already been taken in line with a policy suspension that doesn't, other policies that the new language would speak to, a later ratification or vote to not ratify a policy that has been already set aside and action already taken could be problematic. That's all I'm suggesting for that.
Okay.
All right, so let's go ahead and vote on this amendment. And I have it. I will read it again. This is Ms. Gibson proposed and Dr. Sapini seconded this amendment to the resolution that we add. Therefore, be it resolved that the superintendent notify the board and public of any further policy waivers 7 days in advance, and the board must ratify this at its next meeting or the action will not stand. Okay, Ms. Wilson, let's have our vote.
Ms. Dorr?
Yes.
Mr. Barlow?
Yes.
Ms. Gibson?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Dr. Sapini?
Yes.
Ms. Cosby?
Yes.
Ms. Page?
Ms. Page?
Ms.
You need to vote on the
Amendment?
amendment.
No.
Was that a no? Ms. Burke?
No.
And Ms. Owen?
No.
Motion passes 6-3.
Okay. Now we will vote on the resolution as amended. Do I have a motion to approve the resolution as amended?
So moved.
Mr. Barlow? Is there a second?
Second.
Was that
Mr.
Dr.
Young?
Mr. Young?
Yes.
For clarity, Chair,
Yes?
and I apologize because my internet is still not working. So we are voting on the resolution
As amended,
provided by Virginia School Board Association.
but as amended. The whole resolution with that amendment. Okay?
Okay.
All right, Ms. Wilson?
Ms. Cosby,
Yes.
Mr. Young,
Aye.
Dr. Sapini,
Yes.
Ms. Dorr,
Yes.
Mr. Barlow,
Yes.
Ms. Gibson,
Yes.
Ms. Page,
Ms. Page?
Oh, I said yes.
She said yes.
Ms. Burke.
No.
I'm sorry, was that no?
That's correct.
Thank you. And Ms. Owen.
Yes.
Motion passes 8-1.